all of these might not sound like they have to do with confidence on the surface. And that's the thing. Confidence doesn't come from trying harder. Confidence doesn't come from trying to be someone else. Confidence is not something that you're born with or not. Confidence comes from understanding who you are and how you naturally operate so that you can remove all the noise and speak while sending the right signals. See, most people don't need more techniques. Most people need fewer roadblocks to get to the confidence that they're aiming for. If you find yourself wanting to sound more confident when you speak, to articulate your thoughts with more clarity and authority, especially at work, you're in the right place. Most people find themselves consuming and watching all the tips and tricks that are out there that just don't seem to work. And there's a core reason why that just seems to be overlooked in the communication space. And that's because when your psychology is not set up for success, any tip or trick that you learn will be difficult to implement, will be difficult to keep, and just won't work for you. Now, most people make the mistake of thinking that they're the reason it doesn't work, when in reality, it's a little bit deeper than that. So in today's episode, I'm going to be unpacking the 3 psychological principles that I see consistently making my clients sound way less confident and credible than they actually are. So by the end of today's episode, you'll understand why sounding confident has been so challenging for you so far, why it's happening, and what you can do about it moving forward. If you're new here, hi. I'm Christina. I'm a social psychologist, and I've spent over 15 years studying human behavior and how our minds work. Now I work with clients on their executive presence and on their communication skills, on the way that they show up, so that sounding confident isn't something that they're stressing about. It's just a natural byproduct of who they are. So let's get right into it. Welcome to The Self-Led Leader, a podcast for high performers who want to lead from alignment, not expectation. I'm Dr. Christina Ady, a social psychologist, and I'm here to help you lead with clarity, not chaos. This show is about what happens before the strategy, your mindset, your nervous system, the inner leadership that shapes everything you say and do. Because presence isn't about being loud, it's about being aligned. Let's get right into it. Now, 2026, with the rise of AI, global workforces, digital spaces, I am seeing more and more people recognize the importance of your communication skills, the power of people skills and soft skills, if you will. All these terms that are thrown around that really boil down to understanding that how you as a person show up, speak to others, and carry yourself fundamentally impacts how you're seen by others, how competent, how credible you're seen at work, whether people trust you or not, and ultimately, whether you end up getting that promotion that you keep dreaming of. Understanding how to function and have technical skills has sort of become an average baseline, meaning you're just expected to have the skills. And when everyone has the same technical skills, what makes you stand out becomes your people skills. And your communication skills is a huge part of that. There's a reason there's so many trends about how to speak like a CEO or articulate your thoughts like the top 1%. And those are great, and I love watching those videos too. But here's the thing. Most advice is geared towards generalized, basic principles that you need to try and implement on your own. And until you understand how your psychology works, why certain situations make you anxious or trigger something like forgetting your train of thought, that advice won't stick. Yes, you will get a little bit of benefit from it, but if you're looking for long-term, sustainable changes to how you communicate, especially to how confident you feel when you speak to others, then you first need to understand why you lack that to begin with. You see, most people make the mistake of thinking if they're not a confident communicator, that they're actually just bad at speaking. And that's not the case. In reality, there is so much happening under the surface with your mindset, with your psychology, with your nervous system, before you ever even open your mouth. And so let's get into the 3 psychological reasons why sounding confident seems so hard, and how none of them have to do with skill or personality. Now, as a social psychologist, I have spent a lot of time doing research and learning about the impact that our environment has on us, And that has to do with quite literally the physical environment that we're in, but that also has to do with the people that we grew up around and the people that we spend most of our time with. Now, depending on how you grew up, we all were exposed to different cultural norms, different gender roles and expectations, as well as different family values or expectations that our parents, our guardians, people in our family placed on us. And all of that shaped our perspective for what we think is important and how we need to carry ourselves. That becomes the baseline for how you function and how you behave, aka how you carry yourself in public. But for some reason, when it comes to communication, that just seems to be overlooked. So if you were told your whole life that you need to be quiet, that you shouldn't take up the most space, that the greater good for everyone comes above the greater good for yourself, then it's not surprising that hearing generic advice like project your voice with more volume or make a single point and pause at the end just won't be effective for you. Yes, it sounds like valid advice on the surface, but when your psychology, when your mindset, when the things that you have believed for years, if not decades, are screaming at you not to do that, when your thoughts take over and you start to misinterpret it and feel like it's anxiety, well, it's no wonder that that advice doesn't last. And so the most important thing that I see being overlooked in the communication space is the importance of understanding your own social upbringing and the social norms that you were taught. So that's one context of social norms that's overlooked. And we can think of that as the micro, as the inner world that we each bring to the table. And then we have a little bit more of the macro, which is the actual environment of our workplace, the expectations and the social norms that other people are bringing into each meeting as well. Because mind you, how you grew up is not how your coworker grew up. And what you believe about confident communication is very likely to be different from what they believe. And so what I see happening at work is that when someone is new to the workplace, and you can think about the last time you started a new job, it's a little bit stressful, you're on your best behavior, you're trying to gauge the environment and the cultural fit to see how you can act, what you can do, and what you can kind of get away with. But what ends up happening once you've been there for quite some time, especially if you've been there for years? You start to get comfortable. Everything starts to become automatic and it becomes normal to you. If we're not intentional about looking for those differences, when we get comfortable, we become habitual and everything just becomes kind of secondary. And so what ends up happening when you think that here's all these reasons on the micro level of why I was taught not to speak up, or why I was told I should not take up space, or my opinion doesn't matter, or whatever the case is for you. When you bring all of that into the workplace and you've been there for a while and you've gotten comfortable, what ends up happening is that you have something called the spotlight effect. And this is when all of your attention starts to go on you and you forget about the influence of other people around you. Especially when you are nervous, you're anxious, you're doubting your own communication skills, and it's almost your turn to speak, well, all your attention focuses inward. And so you become way more self-critical, you judge yourself more harshly, you think you performed worse than other people think you did, and you continue to focus just on yourself. And if you already think you're not a good communicator, and you're looking for reasons why you're not communicating well at work, well, that attention is just going to continue highlighting all the reasons why you think you're not doing well. And so what ends up happening is you almost end up in a negative spiral, thinking you're not good, becoming anxious, judging yourself for any little mistake that you made, any thought that you forgot, any bit of rambling that took place, which then makes you feel like you're not a good communicator, you'll never improve, which gives you more anxiety, which gives you more focus on the things you're not doing well, and the cycle continues to repeat. But here's the thing you're overlooking. There's other people around you in the environment, and you are overestimating how much you think they're paying attention to you and judging you for your lack of communication skills. Now, there's this really interesting thing that happens in psychology where we all think that we are the center of attention. And so even when it's our turn to speak, when we need to present an update, when we show up in the meeting and we know the 7 different mistakes that we make, we assume everyone else noticed too. But I'm going to challenge that for a moment. Think about the last meeting that you were in this week. How many people made a mistake? How many people stuttered? How many filler words did your coworker use? Do you remember those details? Do you even care about those details? I'm going to bet that the answer is no, because most people spend way more time thinking about themselves than they do thinking about others. And the exact same thing is happening with you. You are not only overestimating how many mistakes you're making, but you're overestimating how much other people care. Now, don't get me wrong. The caveat to this is yes, your communication skills matter. And yes, you are constantly sending signals with the way that you speak of whether you're trustworthy, credible, or not. So they are important to improve. But you are likely overestimating how bad you think you are doing and how much other people care. And so what do you do with this information? Well, here's the good news. The fix, the solution is actually really simple. Here's what I want you to do. Start paying attention to how your coworkers speak. If you are someone who doubts your communication skills, you're probably spending the majority of the meeting anxiously stressing about your upcoming turn to speak. And so you're rehearsing, you're mentally going through your points. Maybe you feel like you're on the verge of a panic attack and you're trying to just hold it together. The point is, you're not paying attention to what other people are doing, what they're saying, or how they're saying it, because all of your attention, again, is inward on yourself. And likely, after it's been your turn to speak, you go through a period of sigh and deep relief, where again, the focus is on yourself and just taking that deep breath and de-stressing from the adrenaline rush that you just experienced. And again, you're missing what other people are doing, what they're saying, and how they're saying it. It is important. Actually, it is imperative that you start paying attention to how other people speak in meetings. Now, aim for either your peers or anyone who's above you. So that could be your supervisor, their supervisor, maybe a supervisor in an adjacent department. I want you to start paying attention to how they speak, especially in the moments that tend to stress you out. So this looks like, how do they act and how do they carry themselves? How do they answer questions that they weren't prepared for? Are they stuttering? Do they have 2 to 3 phrases that they're constantly rotating, like, I'll look into it and get back to you by next week? What are they doing? How many filler words are they using? Are they prepared? Or are they actually not that prepared, but they're able to maybe have the same framework that they're going through every week? Are they asking a lot of questions, or are they sort of stuttering through what they need to say and passing it on to the next person? When you start to shift your attention away from yourself and your own anxiety and onto the other people that you're spending time with, you will start to see the cracks in their facade as well. You will start to see that they're making the same mistakes that you are stressing out about, because that is just part of communicating. We all make mistakes in how we deliver information. But the beautiful thing about this is that it gives you a very clear template for how you can improve your communication skills. Because if you're seeing that your superiors, your supervisors are all rotating between 2 to 3 different phrases of, I'll get back to you, I'll look into that, I'm not sure, let me look up more information, you can start to implement those for yourself. If you're someone who tends to be stressed about needing to answer the question right away as soon as someone asks, but you notice that they're taking a few seconds, a few moments to think about it, maybe they're even very strategically saying, like, let me think about that for a second, and then gathering their thoughts. When you start to pick up the nuance of how they communicate, you start to identify the things that make them seem like confident communicators, and that is when you can implement it for yourself. Because when you have this big, ambiguous, be more confident, nebulous cloud hanging over your head, you don't really know what that means. And trying to tackle every single aspect of confident communication at once, especially when you're battling your own expectations of how you should show up, is extremely difficult, and it just won't work. And so, to wrap up the first psychological principle holding you back, stop spending so much attention on yourself and start paying attention to how other people speak and to how they deliver information at work. Take the good, appreciate the bad, because everyone has a bit of both. Now, the second psychological principle that I see so often overlooked is actually the most important one. And this is the idea of your nervous system, your stress levels, and your cognitive load. Now, let me explain what this means. You've heard that stress is bad for you. Heck, by now you've experienced it for yourself. Stress makes you change the way that you show up as well as the way that you sound. When your stress levels go up, it not only impacts how you're feeling emotionally, but it impacts the way that your nervous system regulation is working, as well as how you operate cognitively. So increased stress actually reduces how well you can think and how well you can remember information. Now, this is important for how you communicate, because not only do you need to be able to think on your feet, not only do you need to be able to process information to then articulate it clearly, but you also need to be able to remember the right words, phrases, or terminology to use. And so stress cannot be overlooked. But here's the thing, we need to go a little bit deeper with this. Chronic elevated stress levels impact the way that your nervous system operates. When you are someone who has a stressful job, a stressful lifestyle, maybe even things like anxiety, it begins to change your nervous system. Now, this is important because when your nervous system is dysregulated, when you are in a chronic state of stress, overwhelm, overstimulation, when you feel like you're a small thing away from having a panic attack or a major breakdown, that completely changes the way that you carry yourself, the way that you show up, and the way that you're able to speak. Even on a good day, no matter how prepared you are, if your nervous system is dysregulated, that will physiologically change the way that you think and the way that you're able to speak. Now, let's keep going with this. In psychology, we have something called your cognitive load. Think of this as your brain's capacity for how much information it can process and handle at one time. If you're multitasking, if you're doing a lot of things at once, if you have a lot of information coming in, if you're overstimulated, all of these things increase your cognitive load. Think of it as like your computer. If you're running 5 different programs and have 32 tabs open and you're trying to download other things while your Wi-Fi is glitching, well, your computer is just not going to be able to maintain all of that. And it might slow down, it might freeze, it might crash completely. The same thing happens with your nervous system. And so when you have an increased cognitive load, that actually changes the way that you think, that changes the way that you make decisions, and that changes the way that you recall information. AKA, the higher your cognitive load, the worse you think, the worse you process information, and the more difficult it becomes to articulate your thoughts. Now, this is where most people haven't actually made the connection that makes the biggest difference. It's not just about your stress levels. It's not just about your nervous system regulation. Both go hand in hand and exponentially worsen your results. If your nervous system is already dysregulated, that is impacting how difficult it is for you to think about the thing you need to say, for you to actually be able to articulate your thoughts. Because not only does your processing speed slow down, but your memory recall worsens. That means as you're trying to think about your next thought, it's like you're thinking in slow motion. And as you're trying to think about the next word you want to say, it's like you're using a file directory with broken links everywhere. You just can't find the words you're looking for. And so what I want you to understand is this. If your nervous system is already dysregulated and speaking makes you extra stressed or anxious, well, now you're doubling that. And then you're increasing your cognitive load by trying to think about everything, remember the information, recall the points you need to make while also trying to maybe implement some of the stuff you learned on YouTube. And now you're just over the top. Another way to think about this is if you were your phone with your phone battery. A chronically dysregulated nervous system is draining your battery to like 40%. And you're just not operating as well as you should be. But then when you add in the added stress of the workday, of the meetings, as well as the added stress of, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to speak well in this meeting, and the panic that comes with that, well, you've already drained your battery to 10%. And now trying to show up as a confident communicator on a 10% battery, well, you are setting yourself up for failure and not even knowing why. And so what I want you to consider is this. Is the thought of speaking up and speaking with confidence making you stressed? Or are the chronically high levels of stress you're experiencing leading you to perform way more poorly than you could be? If this is making sense, drop a brain emoji in the comments so that I know this point hit home, because this is one of my favorite points to talk about, and I've seen the biggest difference in myself. As someone who had 2 kids while in school full-time and running a few side businesses, I could tell you my nervous system was dysregulated and completely beat down. And I noticed it for myself. It was hard to think. It was hard to function. It was hard to speak. And especially because I had 2 young kids at the time, and I was speaking like a child, or I was speaking to my young children a lot of the time. When I showed up and had to speak with other functioning adults in a professional setting, boy, was it hard. The words were not there. The vocabulary was not there. Everything was just way more challenging because of the physiological state that I was in. And so if this is something that's happening for you, there is a way out, but it's not something that will happen overnight. It's something that you will have to spend time with and learning the techniques that will work for you to re-regulate your nervous system on a daily basis, to then be able to show up in the way that you want. Just like you have to charge your phone battery every single day, you can't charge yourself and do self-care once a week or once a month and expect that battery to last. And so if you've watched all the techniques, tried all the tips, but you can't get them to actually stick, it might not be because you're a terrible communicator and you'll just never get it. It might just be because your system can't tolerate them yet. And so moving on to our third psychological principle, and this is a really good one because I think it's so incredibly easy once you understand it, and it makes one of the biggest differences. In some of my research, I actually examined how our attitudes and our abilities get passed down from parents to kids. And one of the most interesting things that I learned consistently and that I saw in my research was how much exposure to someone else impacts the way that we understand the world and the way that we carry ourselves. And so when it comes to communication, one of the biggest things that I see is that people are not intentional with what they're exposing themselves to. Now, I won't get into the nuance and the logistics of how much everything you consume impacts you. From the shows you watch, the music you listen to, the books you read, the people that you talk to. Whatever you are consuming and spending time around is influencing you and influencing how you sound when you speak. So here's what I want you to assess real quick, and drop a star emoji in the comments if this resonates, okay? I want you to do a quick audit of who are the types of people that you spend the most time with. What kinds of things are you listening to? Do you like to watch YouTube videos? Do you like to listen to podcasts? Are you watching trash reality TV? There's no judgment here. It's all just information. But then also think about maybe your spouse, your partner, your friends, your family. And what I really, really, really want you to pay attention to is how casual versus how confident is the way that you speak with everyone around you. Because I'm willing to bet the majority of us are consuming and spending time with very casual conversations. And that's not a bad thing, but hear me out. If you are speaking very casually to your friends and family, if you're coming home and just you have your inside jokes and maybe you're complaining or ranting with your partner, if you're talking to your kids all the time, if you're listening to shows or to YouTube videos that again are using very casual language, well, you will be incredibly well equipped to speak casually. But if you are looking to speak professionally, if you're looking to articulate your thoughts eloquently in a work setting, if you're looking to show up with confidence and authority and credibility in a professional setting, that means you should be consuming content, podcasts, audiobooks, and having conversations that mimic that a lot more closely. Now, this doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to join any groups or go out of your way to add more professional conversations into your life, but it will help. Because the more that you hear it, the more that you expose yourself to it, the more ingrained it will be in how you think. It's kind of the same principle where when someone wants to learn a new language, they don't just casually consume Duolingo on an app for months at a time. They go and they visit that place and they spend time in the culture talking to people and figuring it out on the go. Because when you're completely immersed in it, you pick it up a lot faster and it just becomes the norm. the exact same thing will happen for you in your communication skills. And so, regardless of how much you love your reality TV shows, what I want you to do is find 2 to 3 role models of a professional, we'll be lenient here, a professional communicator that you enjoy the style of. And I want you to find, maybe that's more professional aimed podcasts or audiobooks. And I want you to start listening, and I want you to start adding in those to your everyday routine. Maybe that means 2 to 3 times a week you're listening to an audiobook. Maybe on your way home you listen to at least one YouTube video with more intellectual, stimulating conversations so that you get a sense of how to speak, articulate your thoughts, make your point without some of the more casual hype that YouTube or podcasts can have, right? I want you to start to be intentional with how you speak based on how you listen to other people speak. Now, this is important because when you find your 2 to 3 role models, when you begin to listen to them, I want you to start to pay attention to what is it about their communication style that stands out to you, but that also you consider to be confident, eloquent, articulate, or any other term you'd like to use. And then I want you to try it on and to practice it for yourself. So let's say, as an example, you think that Dr. Joe Dispenza is a phenomenal public speaker. Maybe you watch an hour or 2 of his interviews to get a sense for how he talks. Then you can spend time, and like 10 minutes a day will be sufficient. Listen to a snippet, let's say 15 to 20 seconds of something that he said, and then try to mimic it for yourself. And so when you pick your role models and you're trying to mimic it, what you're going to do is you're going to pay attention to what their tone is like. What kind of emotion are they conveying with their voice when they talk? What is their volume like? Are they speaking at one volume consistently? Are they speaking quieter than you typically do, louder than you typically do? Do they fluctuate their volume depending on the point that they're making? Right? And then I also want you to pay attention to what is their pace like? Do they take a break every 2 to 3 words versus do they have kind of like melody in the way that they speak, the way that a song would have longer sentences, shorter sentences, and natural flow? I want you to start to pay attention to the nuance of how they speak. And also, very important that you start to pay attention to their vocabulary. What kinds of words are they using? What kinds of words are they not using? Are they saying things like, you can't? Or are they pronouncing it with the you cannot, right? It's the little details that become the big things. And so you watching, you will all have different examples of what you consider to be a good role model. I want you to think of it the same way that there are a ton of different music genres and different artists within each ones. If you're aiming to be the Beatles or Beyonce or Eminem or Pink or anyone else, clearly I don't listen to too many music genres, but there's different genres and there's different people at the top of each genre and their styles are completely different because what you naturally gravitate to will differ than someone else, and that is okay because here there are no cookie cutter tips and no one size fits all communication techniques. And so drop a comment and let me know who your 2 to 3 role models are. I'd be curious to hear and to see how much variety comes through. And a very important point I want to make is that by picking your role models, by exposing yourself to other ways of speaking, by expanding your comfort zone of how you articulate your own thoughts through practice and through trying on their style, what you'll find is that it's not about copying. It's not about mimicking. You're not here to copy someone else's style. You are trying on different techniques and developing your own style in the process. The same way that you would go shopping and try on different clothes and mix and match them to create your own stylish outfit, you are going to do the same thing with your communication techniques. There are so many ways to speak that are considered to be confident. There's so many techniques. So it's not about learning them all. It's about understanding the right ones for you. Because it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the version of being a confident communicator that you have in mind for you. And so, putting all the pieces together, the 3 psychological principles that we talked about today, understanding social norms, understanding your social upbringing, understanding how much your cognitive load and your nervous system impacts your ability to think, to recall information, to articulate your thoughts, and exposure to other ways of speaking in order to find your own style. All of these might not sound like they have to do with confidence on the surface. And that's the thing. Confidence doesn't come from trying harder. Confidence doesn't come from trying to be someone else. Confidence is not something that you're born with or not. Confidence comes from understanding who you are and how you naturally operate so that you can remove all the noise and speak while sending the right signals. You see, most people don't need more techniques. Most people need fewer roadblocks to get to the confidence that they're aiming for. And so with all of these psychological principles, it's really coming down to understanding yourself, understanding how you currently operate, and understanding how to have more capacity for yourself so that you're able to hold space, recall the information, and say what you need to say without breaking down in the process. Because if you make a mistake, if you lose your train of thought, if you forget something important you were supposed to say, that doesn't mean you're not confident. Matter of fact, it's in those exact situations that determine whether or not you come across as confident. Because when you can hold capacity for yourself, when you understand that making mistakes is just part of it, and when you can have the confidence to answer with no pressure, even if you don't have the information right then and there, that is how true confidence is built from within and noticed by others. If you're looking to dig deeper and understand how you currently think, where you're getting caught up, and some of the communication mistakes that you're currently making, likely without realizing, go ahead and check out the 180 Signals assessment that I've created. I'll link it in the description below. This is a free assessment that you can take to really start to unpack some of the psychological things that are happening with you before, during, and after you speak to others. Because again, confidence isn't just about in the moment. It's about the groundwork and the foundation to prep yourself. It's about how you show up, and it's about how you react and treat yourself afterwards. And so, my friend, if your confidence feels like it's lacking or like it's just too inconsistent, I really want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with you, and you've likely just haven't fully optimized your own psychology yet. Once you do that, I want you to think of it as like the first domino that will fall and make everything else fall down smoother, faster, better. I hope you found this helpful. Comment down below if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.